just a minute. I know we might get another person or two in here, but we're trying to be careful about our time. And with people online, they're not going to really be able to hear me. But my name is Bodan Vedas. I am the chair of the board of the Fellowship Recovering Lutheran Clergy. If you don't know, that was the group that kind of birthed the very first Addiction and Faith. And that was the language we used it because there was a lot of pain and suffering. So we birthed something, and this is now the third time. And Michael's been with us
at least twice.
At least twice before.
Yep.
So, you know, he's a repeat offender, and we love that. But you're all here to listen to him and not to me, but we're grateful for this time together and this chance to have a breakout session. You guys know why we're here, and you know, that's because you all want to learn more about codependency. And so we're all going to learn from Michael and get a chance to hear from him, but let's give him a round of applause and some encouragement.
Good to be here. Thank you. I want to just take a couple moments to introduce myself, and so you get to know who I am a bit. So Michael Broviac, clinical social worker. I am married. I've got two boys that are 15 and 17, so I'm kind of right in the thick of things right now. Have enjoyed teaching my kids to drive a vehicle. I've found that to be an interesting time to connect. Who would have thought, right? I can say that I influenced my older son to like Frank Sinatra, because here in the Twin Cities, on Sunday nights from 8 to 9 o'clock, when we would drive after his youth group would meet, I would listen to Frank Sinatra. So he likes Frank Sinatra. Who would have thought, right? Jazz station, anyways. I work for a company called Traverse Counseling and Consulting. It's an agency here in the Twin Cities. And we have a specialty of working with families dealing with rather complex difficulties. And these can be in the arena of high conflict, so dealing with extraordinary divorce cases or reunification dynamics in families, as well as major mental illnesses and substance use disorders. The lens that we take in our practice is one of focusing on the family system. We believe that if we can see someone struggle with mental health or substance use disorder, if we can see it through the lens of a family system, and we can help that family figure out how to operate, we can help people in their recovery or overcoming the obstacles they face. We're a small agency. We've got 3 clinicians and 2 support staff. We have a fundamental belief in the human spirit to overcome things. Believe that it is phenomenal, and if we can help a family system figure out how to align that spirit to overcome together in a common force, it is amazing what can be done. So a bit of my biases I'm sharing with you. We get cases from county court systems that don't know what to do. How do we help this family get unstuck? So happy to share with you. I encourage you all to be curious today and ask questions. When I was in college, I made the mistake my freshman year of signing up for a biology class that started at 8 a.m. And had to get on a bus by 7:15 to start. And I don't know about you, when I was in college, late nights were the routine. And so the only way I could stay awake was sitting in the front row and asking lots of questions. So you guys have the lunch mode, right? You've had lunch, you've had one session, and now you've got the second one. So encourage you to be curious, okay? So I have some objectives that I'm looking to accomplish today. I think. Here we go. I'm looking to clarify the definition of codependence and how a family system perspective assists us in understanding the behaviors associated with it and the limitations of its use. I want to review the dynamics of family systems when a member has a substance use disorder and review strategies to support families struggling with the substance use disorder. Question?
It's just purely practical. Will this PowerPoint be available?
My presumption is that all the PowerPoints are available. Okay. So absolutely. So yeah, those that are trying to take copious notes know that this will all be available to you. So great question. Thank you. Yes, be more attentive. Although taking copious notes keeps you awake too, so that's, that helps. Just saying.
But I can also sleep in my eyes.
Yeah. That is a gift. So let's jump in, shall we? We have some time together here, and so again, you guys can add and subtract and challenge me. I always like that as well. So common characteristics of families with substance use disorder. They show a lack of flexibility rather than an excess. That means that family systems struggling with the substance use disorder typically create rigidity to how they operate. And they have difficulty taking in new information or making adjustments and
Or
change.
Lincoln Avenue. Head south on North 400 East.
That's not my phone, somebody else's perhaps. They have high levels of distress and dysfunction. And I would argue that everybody in the family is experiencing a degree of distress. They have low levels of family expressiveness, cohesion, and agreement. So the inverse of that, the opposite, is that you're going to see high conflict. Difficulty or avoidance of conflict is the typical patterns we see. This is an interesting point that I think is important to note. They experience what has been termed the reciprocal causality of maladjustment. This means the substance misuse leads to family dysfunction, but that family dysfunction and conflict also affect substance misuse and relapse. Thus, the two are interconnected. So if you can see, this is what we would call a perpetual problem, a perpetual spin that keeps a family very, very stuck in a pattern they desperately wish they could get out of, but don't see ways out. And so you see families in this struggling with how do we have hope when we're in this hard, hard place? One of my colleagues, rather than calling it codependence, he calls it co-suffering, which I think is quite a compassionate way to explain this, right? It's co-suffering. We're in this together and suffering. We wish we could get out of it. The notion of homeostasis is important for us to think about. We're all trying to create it and keep it in our lives. If you address a symptom of dysfunction in the family, it will either return or show up somewhere else if the source of the symptom is not addressed. Again, this is where families are stuck. They're trying to get out of it, but there's a homeostatic bind that they're in that we just mentioned in the last slide. It's reinforcing each other. They're so stuck. And that's the homeostasis they're in. It is not healthy for them, but it is a homeostasis. Important concept to think about. Codependence. So this is I'm already going to tip my bias here. I find this term to be not useful in working with families. But I want to at least give you what we see as a definition. Complementary or parallel disease to alcoholism. This is where it sort of drew out of, is alcoholism. Exhibited by the alcoholic's significant others. The codependent person presumably exhibits several symptoms associated with the disease. Examples of control, perfectionism, frozen feelings, emotional blunting, or external referencing, and engages in enabling behaviors. Okay? So that's sort of the term we have for it. Enabling kind of goes hand in hand with codependence. These are the behaviors that perpetuate another person's substance use. So example, protecting that person from experiencing the natural consequences, or allowing them to make access easier, or covering up for the person's substance use. Okay? These are examples of enabling type behaviors. Now, we've seen this, I'm sure if some of you have been around the block a few times with the substance use disorders, you see some of the kind of terminology that we see, that you have the dependent and codependent, and then we sort of see these different roles that can form in family systems. And I want to caution us because the moment we start to assign people's roles, we move into judgment. Okay? And I want to just caution us that once we move to judgment, we dehumanize people pretty rapidly. Oh, you're the family hero. Oh, I already know you then, right? Well, not really. So these are some of the cautions that comes with our way of understanding this. So the family hero is the kind of the person in the home that is the high achiever, that's doing everything they can to kind of be perfect. You have the scapegoat, who's usually the problem child, who's creating all sorts of disorder, disruption, conflict. The mascot, this is the comedian, right? The mascot that's trying to stand up and make everybody laugh. The lost child, the one that's just quiet in the back, okay? So these are sort of the roles that we see. However, I would want to pose to you that if we were to get to know each one of these children, because typically these roles are children, it can be adult children as well, okay? If we were to get to know each of these human beings that operate with this behavior pattern, we would see that they're trying to survive in an extraordinarily difficult circumstance. And that they're just trying to see, how can I live and make this work? And how can I keep homeostasis in my family system? How can I make this function? Even if it's a dysfunctional functioning, it's creating order or predictability, which creates immense binds and difficulties for children in these situations because they truly are dependent on their parents for survival. Absolutely.
I'm assuming that a child could have more than one role.
Oh, yes. You bet. And it can fluctuate over time. And one child could play all roles. Yes, fluctuating from role to role. Yes, absolutely. Human beings are amazing, right? Our adaptability, even if it's in an unhealthy way. So it poses the question, why would a human being choose to behave this way? What is the purpose of it? Again, I already tipped my hand on what I think about that, right? So we're trying to make sense of this. Why is this happening for children, or why it's happening to family members? So there's some limitations of this use of codependence. So it's a cautionary tale. It pathologizes the person. It oversimplifies the problem and treatment to individuals, when in fact we're really dealing with a systemic problem. This is interesting. There really is no research or evidence to support this diagnosis of codependence. Isn't that interesting? I've done literature reviews. I don't see it in the literature. So it's a notion that's come out of the substance abuse field. Okay. Go ahead.
Isn't there some similarity to where I've worked with families where there's a chronically ill child,
Yes.
a child with cancer?
Yes.
Is that I see the same thing happening
Yes.
with you know, a sick child or a parent that's dying of cancer, or you know, just one member of the family and I see such parallels. Is that it?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. So
There's research on that.
yes. So yeah, the comment was that there's replication seen where there can be major medical conditions in a family or major mental illness that occurs in a family system. Absolutely spot on. The family and the members of the family are trying to create homeostasis.
Yeah.
If I have a parent that is compromised in their ability to parent, the children may step in to try to adjust to create homeostasis so we can operate. Great point. The other thing about the notion of like enabling, you know, there are these behaviors that are present in the vast majority of us. We all make accommodations to support our family system in functioning. Question, go ahead.
Would it be less stigmatizing to just say that the addicted person is afflicted with the disease and those around him are affected by the disease?
Absolutely. You bet. lots of ways of defining it. This is a family that's afflicted with this disease. This person is the primary identified person struggling with the substance use disorder, but it is affecting everybody in this family. It's sort of the presumption I work off of. Again, it's a symptom of the system. These behaviors are more effectively understood in the context of a family system. And maladaptive function misrepresented as necessary for the survival of the family. They're usually insidious, right? They start off benign, and then we start to accommodate to make it work. So if you think about it, nobody goes off in life and say, I'm going to be an addict, right? But it's something that typically evolves over time. The family's trying to accommodate to make it work over time. It's an evolution, right? We're trying to make sure we're all okay getting what we need. And it's hard because it can turn to being maladaptive. It's not helping us anymore. It's keeping us stuck. And then it gets reinforced, right? We talked about that in earlier slides. It's a cycle that can reinforce itself in a very stuck pattern. Here's an example. Stay-at-home mother drinks to the point of not being able to pick up from school, manage the bills, or take care of the house. To keep the family functioning as normally as possible, her teenage daughter may take up these responsibilities rather than try to convince her mother to stop drinking. Thus, the mother continues to drink, knowing her daughter is there to pick up the pieces. It may seem illogical for the daughter to act in a way that actually supports her mother's alcohol use disorder, but she's just trying to keep her family functioning as consistently as possible. This is typical of families with substance use disorders. Members do their best to survive and try to prevent further disruption in their relationships and functioning. Enabling behaviors that result from such efforts to keep the balance may seem counterproductive and ill-advised, but they are actually adaptive. Okay, this is interesting, right? Because we're saying that if we start to confront a child in their behavior, the resistance is going to be huge because they're trying to keep their family alive and survive. And they don't have a capacity in this case to be able to confront the mother, right? This is a child that is dependent on her mother, as every child is. So this is a stuck family system, right? So the substance use disorder escalates, child responds, keeps the addiction behavior in place, and reinforces this pattern. You see how this spins? This family is stuck, really stuck, and they don't know what to do. They want out of it, but are very stuck. So enabling is common, normal reaction among family members with substance use disorders. It doesn't help to do any shaming or blaming or lecture family members about this because they're trying to survive, right? Families are just trying to do the best they can to help their family members in the best way they know how.
Your paper doesn't realize they're here taking. Instead of being a caregiver,
Yeah, that is what happens if somebody's really attached into the role of that caretaking function. Sort of the enmeshment, right? I've lost myself in the relationship, and I'm presuming and taking on the function. That is an issue that is problematic in systems, family systems like this. And so there is work to try to help people with differentiation, which is often some of the harder work when we try to get families into recover. How do we help you all get clear on your roles and how you want to operate? Thank you for that. Great input. Family systems are dynamic, changing over time. As members change, individuals change, relationships change, context changes. You know, my children have changed our family, right? They're growing older, becoming more independent.
Those of us in Zoom can't hear you.
I just sent a text to someone who's sitting there. Hopefully she'll say something.
Thank you.
I know.
It's really frustrating. It's getting so good.
I know.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, you
There
guys.
you
I
go.
muted myself. I think where I was on there, you guys have lost a few minutes here. My apologies. Just a reminder that in a family system, when one part of the system changes, it affects everybody else. We're all connected in a family system. It also raises some questions when we're helpers, we're trying to be present, or ministers, trying to minister to them. How do you choose to enter this system? And how do they enter ours? Poses some interesting kinds of questions. Some families that are really rigid, it can take a long time to be able to enter in, that they would allow you in. Are you safe? Are you a threat? There can be all sorts of secrets that people have. So this gets to be part of the our work as we try to work and help others. Remember, we have subsystems. So again, we talk about complexity. You have the whole family together, and then typically there's a marriage, right? Or couples that are coupled up together, married or not, or a divorced family system. You typically have the adults, and interestingly, they may or may not be aligned. Okay, this is often a challenge that we see in family systems. And there can be alliances that can be made. I grew up in a big family, 6 kids. My youngest brother and sister were twins. Okay, and the alliance they had is still unique to this day in our family. And so, again, you start to see different ways siblings operate within families, and parents can have alliances with children that can be healthy or unhealthy. And if we remember, families can be the center of a system, but we also have relationships beyond the family system. There are also, if we think about a systemic lens, there's different parts of our connections that we have. Our neighborhood, friends, extended family, church, work. Some families have involvement with legal system or child protection. Again, these are all parts of that are impacting a family and how they're operating. That can be helpful tools and resources, and also can complicate or make it more difficult for them to operate. Just as family members can have alliances with each other, families can have alliances that can be healthy or unhealthy with other people that or agencies outside of the family system. And it's multi-generational. This stuff fascinates me because we can't always be aware of how I have probably behavior characteristics of my great-grandparents in some way, shape, or form, or that they've had influence on me. If any of you have done any of the research on ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, there's some quite profound ways that particularly alcoholism is passed on to the next generation. If you have adverse experiences of this, you're at higher risk, clearly, of having alcoholism affect you personally, or in the relationships, more likely to marry someone that has a substance use disorder. And just fascinating. Yeah. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. It was body of research done in the 90s. They're still ongoing in California. Kaiser Permanente Health Insurance pulled this all together, reviewed a bunch of records, and they identified that there are 10 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that have high correlations for incredible risks into the future. Smoking, anxiety, depression, marrying someone who has alcoholism, antisocial behavior, health-related issues, COPD. So it's a profound piece of research to help us understand why we need to do more to help prevent children from experiencing the plight of substance use disorders. Well, boundaries is such an interesting thing. Whenever I work with families, I'm always trying to walk in to understand the code, right? What's the code for this family? How do they work? And how do they operate? And what are the boundaries that they have with each other? Are they diffuse? Is it that everybody kind of does everything in the family? Is there enmeshment? Is there rigid? Or are they cutting people off? Used to have a coworker that had Irish blood. He talked about, well, they're dead to me at times. It's like, okay, that's one way to do it, but that's cutting people off. And sometimes that happens. So we're trying to understand what are the ways the family operates within the boundaries that they have. The notion of feedback loops and how they operate. Negative feedback loops continue to perpetuate current system patterns. They reinforce it. Remember we talked about the substance use of one member of the family reinforces the reaction that the family has to that use, which reinforces the substance use, right? That's a negative feedback loop that's keeping that family in a spin cycle. Positive feedback is how do we introduce new things, new ideas to help them change that pattern to create a new way of operating. Helpful language to think about whenever we're trying to help somebody to change, we're using a positive feedback loop, positive feedback change. Another dynamic we see in families that can get stuck is the over-functioning, under-functioning piece. This is a situation where family members, examples are children may become the messenger between conflicted parents. They're over-functioning, right? They're taking on a function that the parents have. Under-functioning, a parent who disengages from parenting because of an extremely well, just they're in conflict and they disengage. Okay, I don't want to be in this anymore. I'm going to underfunction. Interestingly, the homeostatic piece steps in, right? So if a parent disengages, we see this with major mental illness. A family member has it, they're not able to function as well, or medical condition. We see children and other family members step up to overfunction. Now, at times, I don't know if it's healthy to pathologize this because I've worked with many families that have a child with severe disabilities, and parents, the demand of time for them is incredible to keep things going. And so we often see family members functioning, stepping up and taking on additional functions, where I think it gets problematic if it prevents a child from fulfilling their developmental tasks. If I can't be a kid and I can't do things I want to do because I have to stay home and take care of my sibling or my parents, that's when it starts to create distress for families.
When this happens, is it subconscious on the part of the parents?
Yeah, it can be. It's a great point, right? The homeostasis is something we're all just trying to make this work. Think about COVID. COVID created a shift in how families had to operate. How do we create a new homeostasis, seeing that all my kids are home, and now we got to do Zoom classes, and now I'm working at home too. This was a game changer for families.
And many parents still were in the workforce, and their children were, but the kids had
Yes.
to please each other and school themselves. And parents are getting calls from school saying your kids are locked out.
Yes. That, you got it, right? So the children are at home trying to be online. Parents have to go to work to take care of what they got to take care of, and kids aren't able to manage the structure of their own on their own. So yeah, parents were really in a hard place.
And if it's not subconscious and the parent does it intentionally, is it still codependence or is it just evil?
It's an interesting question. If somebody does this intentionally, if I intentionally force a child to overfunction, is that a pathology? Is that something that parent is struggling with? Yeah, there's be some perhaps ways of looking at it that way. I'm taking a child out of their role to fulfill this other function that may be serving me personally. So that could be issues of personality may show up there. I tend to stay away from the evil piece, but it's, you know, is there a pathology? Is there something deeper that's stuck there for that person? Go ahead.
But you know, I think too, in the overfunctioning is, like you look at poverty for a single mom.
Yes.
And she has no choice for
That's
good or
right.
bad, but to overfunction.
Yes.
And it's part of the whole homeostasis of the whole system, right?
Yes.
If you're working 2 jobs or a sick child.
Yep.
So I like that you say it's not necessarily something bad or intentional. There's times in life where you're just put in these situations.
Yes. So to understand context of how this is happening is really key if we're going to work and try to help a family out.
Yeah.
The tendency is to blame the underfunctioning member of the family. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you stepping up? You're missing this, you know? So again, pathologizing, blame, it doesn't help. The general rule is if you blame somebody, you're going to get defense pretty fast. So it's not a helpful form of engagement, typically. I don't know if it ever is. When we try to make changes, it can be stressful. Now, the bind here is that we have to be uncomfortable to make change, but then I'm resistant to being uncomfortable. So that's sort of the challenge that we bump into, is how do we help people in these positions that are stuck? Change requires energy, adjustment, resources. COVID, watch everybody that was struggling with this. You were forced to make change. It's a great study of how people operate. And some did great with it. In fact, some thought, I'm never going back. This is better than it was. And some said, I can't wait because you got to get back. My kids cannot do this. It's not working. It's not working for me. I'll adapt to this for now, but I got to get back to something different. Systems resist change. Again, remember, we're looking for homeostasis, equilibrium, balance. I don't want to do any change here because I don't know if it's going to be okay. So again, we see resistance to making change. So when we come back to substance use disorders, relapse, given this systemic resistance, why do we look at relapse as a failure for that person? How can we look at relapse as an opportunity? Is there something that's missing in this family that we need to see if we can try to help the family figure out how to support a change? Question?
What we see is a lot of times when the patient that is healthy and unhealthy person goes back into recovered person, goes back to the family unit, because they haven't made any changes, will almost cause some of the relapses to occur.
You bet.
That system is still so sick and toxic.
Yes.
Resisting that change, so therefore the person feels like they have to go back into in that system.
Yes.
They don't know how to function as a family unit.
Yeah, I go to treatment, I do all this work. I come out and I've got a smile on my face and I want to share this success I just did and where I'm at. And then they walk back into their family system and there's still the unresolved hurt and anger from the past that does pull us back. You're right. And if families aren't doing their work in healing, that makes it really difficult for those coming back into that system. Again, my plug for the more we can do to support families struggling with a family member with substance use disorder, the better a family is going to operate moving forward. Question?
Well, it oftentimes seems that the family members can get sicker than the addicted person because the addicted person has been anesthetized, and the rest of the family is doing this without anesthesia. It's like if you went into surgery and one guy got anesthesia and the other guy didn't. Who do you think is going to suffer more, have more pain? And so a lot of times addicts, it's kind of like the Rip Van Winkle syndrome. They
Yes.
wake up after 100 years ago, I don't see anything wrong here, what's going on, you know? And the family's all laid
Yeah.
out from suffering. And they may be more sick than the addicted person.
Yes, I'm sure many of you, if you've worked with families, I liked you better when you were drinking. Okay? And that's a great example of you're breaking up the homeostasis. At least I knew how to operate when you were drinking or using. I knew how to do all this, but now you're changing. Now you're making me change. Well, now I'm really pissed at you, right? It's not me, it's you. It's like, okay, let's back up. Can we see this as a family issue here? And so I just put out a continuum of services. We talk about intervention. That's a family coming together to say, we gotta do something. This isn't working. Typically, the treatment is individualized, and then if we work on wellness, it's got to be both, individual and the family. Now, each treatment program is different, and each area of support can be a little bit different. I would argue if we could have family getting support through the whole process, I think we can have better outcomes. There's always a time where families just need a little bit of cooling off time after we get somebody into treatment. Can we all just kind of breathe a little bit here? And let's make sure everybody's doing the steps they need to work through to get to a healthier place. Again, we just talked about this. You know, a person's coming back trying to regain their role, and there's this resistance that they experience. Parent-child relationships, a parent coming out of treatment saying, hey, I'm back to do the dad job here. Wait a minute, I've been doing this for the last 3 years. Where have you been? And now you want to come in and try to do this? I don't think so. So again, you see the adjustment. We have to have a lot of support for families to figure this stuff out. This is often where a great deal of the family therapy work that I see, people come out of treatment, they're trying to figure out how do we create this new homeostasis, and if you think about it, there's often so much hurt that's happened, and they're struggling with how do we repair this, because we don't even know how to talk about it sometimes, right? How do we help them create structure to help them see the dynamics that are happening and do it in a way that is palatable? I can take it in, I can hear it, and understand it, and then I can see what steps I need to take. So, family is a context for an individual's substance use disease problem, may play a role in emergence and maintenance of the substance use disorder, may also play a role with intervention, treatment and recovery process. Family remains relevant to individuals. I think families, and I'm biased here, I think the work that we have is to help families as much as we can. I'm going to go off on a little sidebar again, a little of my biases. We're struggling with a medical model that focuses on individuals. And this is a significant barrier because families trying to access healthcare coverage for family therapy work, which we know is evidence-based, does help people in recovery and has better outcomes, struggle to find coverage for this. This is my advocacy. This is a tragedy, in my opinion, because if a family could access services to help them figure this out together, help them to heal, help them to create the new homeostasis, we got better outcomes and trajectories for families. This is a significant problem. I bump into all the time. Unless you have resources, or you are deeply embedded in a county system where they can have someone do in-home family therapy or something, so you have the two ends, right? I've got a ton of resources, I can pay for a private individual therapist, and I'm in child protective system here, or corrections, and I've got access to county services that can have somebody come in. Everything in the middle is not really getting what they need. Now, thank goodness we have treatment centers that are helping, they're providing lots of education. That's typically the nature of it. But there's deeper work that families typically are needing. Thanks for letting me go on my soapbox here. Remember that homeostasis, we're just trying to preserve balance. And think about this, the substance use that a person has serves the family as a stabilizing function. And it maintains behavior to prevent change. And this is that cycle, the bind that families are in with this. So obviously there's barriers to families who are trying to get them help. We know, and I'm sure many of you reviewed the stats on the correlations with substance use disorder and domestic violence. It is significant. And so something that we need to be looking for when we're trying to assess families is it safe in this family system? And so if you're working with families, I always recommend you're meeting with people individually first, just to get a sense of where they're at. Interestingly, survivors of domestic violence will tell you that you need to have them be asked multiple times, because the first time may not be safe, but the second time might be. So we have to be continuous in our just assessing, hey, just want to recheck with you on this. A family that families are survivors of domestic violence, they get to decide when they're ready to tell. And we have to give them grace, because they may decline and deny it first time, but they may come forth at a later date. Legal implications. There's all sorts of legal things that could show up. If families are going to talk about stuff, does this mean child protection is going to get involved? Are there other illegal activities going on? All sorts of things can create barriers. More than one family member actively abusing substances. I remember one of the interventions I went in, and we didn't screen for it. And we walked in and ready to do an intervention, and it's like, well, Dad's still using meth. Why should I quit? It's okay. Time to switch gears here. So you learn, right? Life's a process of learning. High blame levels. You know, when people are in that stuck pattern, the blame function shows up a lot, and then you can see escalation from that, or avoidance. We see people just saying, I don't want to talk about this. Practical barriers, you know, geography, separation, where do I get resources? How do I take care of my kids? If I got to go into treatment and I'm the primary breadwinner for my family, how is my family going to survive if I go and do this? And then obviously complex family problems there's you guys know this, right? There's typically a mental illness if there's a substance use disorder. And if you have identified patient with a mental health disorder, substance use disorder co-occurring, I have a fair presumption that the other family members are struggling with some sort of mental health struggle as well. So you have a family that is struggling in multiple dimensions, multiple levels, needing multiple types of resources. Well, resistance, I think this is the most fascinating thing about families, is when we hit resistance, what do we do with that? And what's the purpose of it? You know, the motivational interviewing, I'm sure many of you studied it, how do you roll with it? The purpose, I want to point this out, resistance is protective. I'm putting the skids on here because I'm not convinced that this is going to help me. And remember, we've got that bind. Substance use is going to reinforce the pattern of behavior the family has, which reinforces the substance use. And if this is going to challenge that and rock this too hard, I don't think I'm going to step into it. It's too much right now. So that's the resistance point, and then we know how do we roll with it. How do we introduce other ideas? I call it the art of the invitation. How can I invite you to look at something? Or would you think about this? What do you think about going to your doctor, just getting checked out? Would that help? Just get some answers. The art of the invitation. Well, we're all part of a system. We're part of multiple systems. When one part of the system changes, the other part experiences disorder and are pushed to a new state of order. A little bit of chaos theory here. The order and disorder is what chaos is. We're always trying to find order. Something creates chaos for us or throws us in disorder. We're trying to create a new order to work. That's that homeostatic function. Resistance by family systems that have not made change will put pressure on somebody in recovery to possibly relapse into old patterns. Interestingly, there are families that are not in a place to heal. And these are families where somebody may need to be out of that family system to find themselves a pattern of recovery that they can sustain for their own well-being. Okay? Some families are not able to do this. And so then we come into choices. Is this something where you need sober living for a while, or are we looking at the breakup of a marriage? Sometimes families need to do that for survival purposes. Yeah.
And I think that becomes really complicated in the church. Because we're always saying we're for reconciliation.
Yes.
And so if children choose to be estranged from a parent, you know, there's always forces within the church saying, well, you gotta forgive, you have to reconcile, or, you know, divorce. And that becomes really, really tough
Yes.
for the child
Yes.
who may choose to separate from this family system and the
Yes.
addictive system, or for the recovering person. But I think for the codependent child or people, they just say, I'm stepping out.
Yes.
You know? And, you know, case in point, for my mom's 85th birthday, and my mom, I grew up in an addictive system. And I drove up to the cottage, which we rented, saying, I will not turn 16. I will not turn 16. You know, hour within it, I was in my assigned role and just had to say, I can't stay here too long, you know? But as a pastor, I've walked with people, helping them step away.
Sure.
The forces from the church are like, don't do that, don't do that.
Yeah, it does create binds, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Some language I've used with people is it life-giving? What's the life-giving path here that we need to take right now? It doesn't mean we're making permanent changes, but what is we need to look at what's life-giving. A little bit of my Catholic heritage of the sacraments, right? What is this something sacred? What's life-giving? How do we make the relationship life-giving? Marriage is supposed to be life-giving to each other. And if it's not, what do we need to do to get it back into that place? My bias, again, is just going back to the system. Remember that codependence, the behavior, if we talk about it as a systemic problem, again, my advocacy is shifting from the use of that language to looking at it as a family system problem, because it takes away the blame. And wherever there's blame or pathologizing, you will get resistance. We can create resistance with the people we're trying to serve by telling you you're codependent. So just feedback, thoughts about that. Behavior issues are common. Change can take a long time. The pace of change is variable. Knowledge is usually not sufficient to motivate change. That's interesting, isn't it? I can tell you how you're stuck, but you still may not get unstuck or choose to get unstuck. They need something more. I would argue that it's hope. How could it look? What are the things that we could do that could make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
So, I'm wondering about the person who grows up in a family system, launches, goes off on their own, but then they're not operating in that original family system, but they're like choosing a certain type of partner or certain type of community where they're reacting, right?
Yes.
Because it's like, yeah, that's how their family origin operated.
Yes.
But it seems like then it's living in the person.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So.
And I don't know if family therapy is available for that original family of origin, but that person is like replaying.
So that's the generational transmission of patterns. right? I grow up in a family system and I operate within a specific role. This is the hard part because we all do this, with addiction or not, right? I have the role in my family of origin, and I was trained in that, and I'm not always conscious of how I do this. And so I bring that into my marriage, and I show up and do those things, and some of them are good, and there's some that really bother my wife, and that's part of the problem that I bring to the marriage. She's got hers. Those are the perpetual spin problems that we have. The more we can learn about those and our insights into those, the better off we're going to be. Doing the marriage work, it's just saying, hey, that's one of the perpetual problems we have. We all have them. I wish in my premarital course they would have said, Michael, did you know you're going to have perpetual problems in your marriage? You're kidding me, really? I love her. No, here's the deal. You guys bring stuff from your history that plays out with each other, and it's going to keep showing up. And the more you're able to see it and manage it, the freer you'll be. And it can actually build greater intimacy.
Call that generational
Transmission of behavior patterns.
was like my old man, my marriage wasn't last past the honeymoon.
So
And that's not, and I'm not kidding, but I say I'm in the,
Yes.
because he's gone now, in the middle of June, he passed away, but I mean, he was one controlling soul. It's way
Sure.
over the highway.
Sure.
It
So-
was unbelievable.
So you learn some patterns, how to survive in that system
Yes.
that you carry with you, and certainly help you not to replicate it as you operate in the new family system that you create. Yeah, thank you. Again, we look stages of change. Again, these are all interactive with each other. A couple of things I'd have you use just some language. How do we lead families when they're distressed? The three words I'd have you focus on are safety, nurture, challenge. Right? Our job as parents is to keep people safe, but if we're a helper, can we build a sense of safety with someone that if we're going to talk, here's the rules, here's what I can share, or here's the privacy I can keep, or confidentiality, that creates safety. And the nurture piece is, can I build a connection with you, a nurturing connection with you that we care about each other? And if I have those two in place, I can do the third, and that's the challenge. That's the nudge, okay? We can get stuck sometimes because we may move to challenge before we've done the other two pieces. Parents get stuck sometimes in the nurture-challenge balance. Sometimes one parent is more into challenge, the other is more into nurture. They need to be aligned in what they want to do in those arenas. Work with the adults. If it's a family, what's going on between them? How aligned are they? Get those expectations and roles in place. Obviously, compassion. Do your best to maintain objectivity and neutrality. This is sort of the work as us as helpers. We have our histories that we bring into this relationship, and we're going to get triggered by stuff. For me, we call it countertransference. It's going to happen. It does for all of us. But can I manage that so I'm not throwing my agenda into this connection I'm making with this other human being? What are we trying to do together? What are the goals? What's the communication process we want to use? What's the relationship skills or forgiveness needs in the family or the couple? And lastly, be aware of your own comfort and skill set to serve this family. I think that's really important, because if I'm wading in too deep on something, this is like, I don't know. It's better to say, let me tell you, I think this may be something I can get you to the right person, but I'm going to walk with you to get to that support person. And many of you, I'm sure, networked with other health professionals or other clinicians that you trust to say, let's go talk to Joe or Molly and let's sit down with them and see how they might be able to help us. Really important. Be the Good Samaritan. I just love this story, right? You remember the Good Samaritan? He doesn't fix it all. He gets them to the hotel or whatever, right? This is what we're about: awareness of the hurt, boundary setting, active listening, the invitation, do you want help? Do you want to be healed? And I don't have outcomes. I got to let go of them. I can just be with you. I can help you on the journey, but I can't solve it for you. Competency is key. A little redundancy here. Remember the innkeeper, sorry, not hotel. Bridging the connection. How do I help you get from here with me to the next person that can help you and to know that I'm not leaving? I'm going to try to stay connected to you. And empathy is embracing others' pain, building tolerance, resilience for the experience of others' pain. They don't have to be alone. That's one of the greatest hardships for people is they suffer in isolation. They're so alone. And the shame that they carry with this, not only for the person with this disease, but the family members carry this deep shame about this. And build some sort of support system. Again, if they're isolated, how can we bridge and make small connections that feel safe? Sometimes people want connections without having to talk about their story. I just need someone I can go knit with, or can I go for someone that's a running group or something? Little things that can build connections are really important for people. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Once somebody's in treatment, we need to stay connected. Yeah. And the family as well. Yeah. To make sure we're reaching out to them. The cards are really important. Little things like that are key. I just, John 5, 2-9, pick up your mat. Reference. What do we try to do with them? Well, again, we're trying to get them referral to treatment. What stabilization or structure do they need? Trying to be proactive with them. When families get stuck, they're typically reacting. Remember the stuck cycle that they're in? They're reacting to each other. They're not seeing a way out of this, how to lead out of the system that's stuck. Sometimes their work helping them to see that. And helping them to see where there's healing and repair. So I do have one case study. We don't have a lot of time, but again, it would be just a few minutes to talk about, here's a potential example, okay? While working on a sermon, you receive a call from Juanita, a member of your faith community. She has been a regular attendee at church services where there are 2 young children, age 7 and 5, and volunteers with Loaves and Fishes program. You only see her husband, David, at services during Christmas and Easter. During the call, she asks for extra prayers for David as he's been ill and struggling. When you ask about this, she shares with you that he has been drinking a lot and they have been fighting. She asked if you could talk to David to get him to stop drinking. Okay? Yes, if it were as simple as that. David, please stop drinking. Okay, Pastor, I'll do that. Okay? So what do you, if now that we look at it from a systemic lens, what are some things that you think may be happening for this family systemically? What are you curious about that you want to perhaps find out more?
First of all, I want to know what time it is. What is this 10 o'clock on Saturday night? That's when these calls.
Yes.
Or when you're walking up to the
Pastor, I got to talk to you. Wait, I got to go, right? Yep.
Mentally, emotionally, if she's breaking the silence.
Yes.
To be asking for her. Bringing to that point, things are not.
I would agree. Yeah.
She is willing to give up the secret.
My guess is it's very bad. Go ahead. Start here and we'll go over here.
She's probably been begging David himself to stop drinking.
Sure.
And doesn't know another just begging, and now if I can get the pastor to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So she herself needs tools.
Yes.
Well, I'm wondering if the arguing ever gets physical for the relationship. I'm thinking safety.
Yeah. So that would be an important thing to screen. Are you okay? Are the kids okay? It's easier to ask about the kids. As parents, we will sacrifice ourselves often, but are the kids safe? Are the kids seeing you guys fight with each other? Has it ever gotten to the point where things have gotten thrown, hurt each other? There's other questions. If you guys want more resources on how to interview around this, there's some really powerful tools out there that can help you assess sort of levels of conflict or interpersonal violence or coercion and control dynamics. If you're interested, you just come after. I can hook you up with a couple of links on that. Yeah, so this is a stuck system that someone has decided to break out. Now, the interesting thing is she may accept help and she may go back into the system. She took a small risk and she may get frightened and then chose to go back, and you may not see her for a bit. Okay? So be aware of that. So again, helping her with agency, letting her see choices she has. What do you feel comfortable doing? You may have to let her know you're a mandated reporter. You know, if we talk about some of this stuff, I want you to know where this may go if you share some things. So I don't want you to be surprised. I might even give examples. You know, if I hear about children witnessing violence, that is something I would have to report. So I just want you to know that. And sometimes if you say that, and then they tell you, they clearly want you to make the call and get help for them. Or they need help with getting to shelter. Do we need to get the police involved? So a lot of things will start playing out. And you're right, it's 10 o'clock the night before, and you already know you're going to need a bunch of time here to try to help figure it out. So we got to wrap up here. I think I'm at 1 minute past. So again, thank you for letting me be here with you. Just a joy to have you here, and thank you for the questions. I'm just so grateful for that. So
one more question.
Sure.
Do you have any observation about this? It's been my observation that a lot of my pastors really like codependence because they do everything.
Sure.
And I think pastors maybe don't check out any further, you know, what is the situation at home, because they're very thrilled to have probably more women do this than men, to have people anyway in their congregation that, you know, they're there every time the doors are open, they take care, they set things up, they communicate. Pastors like codependence.
It's a great observation that is probably worth having pastors do that assessment. Where does this come in as a healthy dynamic, and when is it starting to be unhealthy? So great observation. Thank you. Any other questions anybody has? All right.
If you're just a parish minister, in my opinion, it's going to be okay to meet with that family initially, but then you're going to give them the ministry of the phone.
Yes. Unless you have an advanced skill set, I think you're right. That's staying clear in your role. Here's thank you, and here's what I can do, and here's what I'm going to give you some resources, and I want you to come back and tell me how you're doing. Can be you're staying in connection, but then you're clear on this is my role and what I'm able to help you with. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Well, and I think following up on what you said is that so many pastors like codependence, but so many pastors are codependent. I mean, I know, like I tend to gravitate towards friends, and when I was in seminary, it was amazing how many of us grew up in substance abuse disorder homes.
Sure.
And so part of the reason, ministers go, it's kind of the walking wounded, right? And the own work we have to do on ourselves.
So it's a great observation that we all have to do our own work, don't we? Be clear on are there ways that I'm engaging others in unhealthy ways? Are they unhealthy with me? Yeah, thank you for sharing. You guys, thank you. Just a delight to be with you. Have a great day.